Hello friends, welcome to lesson 11, Workers' Participation in Management and Collective Bargaining. Introduction. Workers' participation in management is one of the important aspects of industrial democracy. It reflects the distribution of social power in industry. Further, workers' participation is a method of providing opportunities to all the members of the organization to contribute ideas along with efforts towards the improvement of organizational effectiveness as well as enhancing workers' own economic welfare. Collective bargaining is a procedure by which the terms and conditions of workers are regulated by agreements between their bargaining agents and employers. Both the employers and the employees may begin the process with divergent views, but ultimately they try to reach a compromise, making some sacrifices. Objectives. After completion of this lesson, you will be able to understand the concept, objectives and levels of workers' participation in management, which we will refer WPM here onwards, making WPM effective, concept and principles of collective bargaining, procedure of collective bargaining and means of strengthening it. Let us begin our discussion by understanding the concept of WPM, which is Workers' Participation in Management. It refers to the participation of non-managerial employees in the decision-making process of the organization. Workers' participation gives employees the mental and psychological satisfaction and thereby increases their involvement in the affairs of the organization. WPM is the most accepted principle of industrial relations in modern industry throughout the world. The basic reason for differences in perception of WPM is mainly due to the differential pattern of practices adopted by various countries while implementing workers' participation in management. For example, in Great Britain and Sweden, WPM is in the form of joint consultation through joint consultative committees. Works committees in France, co-determination committees in West Germany, joint work council in Belgium, workers council and management board in Yugoslavia and union management cooperation in USA. In India, workers' participation in management is in the form of labor management cooperation and workers' participation in management. It is implemented through the agencies like works committees, joint management councils, that is JMCs, shop councils, unit councils and joint councils. WPM is a system of communication and consultation, either formal or informal, by which the workers of an organization are kept informed as and when required about the affairs of the undertaking and through which they express their opinion and contribute to decision making process of the management. Article 43A of the Constitution of India deals with participation of workers in management of industries and falls under Part 4 Directive Principles of State Policy. Workers' participation in management has a long history in India. This scheme was suggested first by Mahatma Gandhi in 1920 in the textile mills of Ahmedabad. According to Gandhiji, both workers and shareholders contribute to the prosperity. There should be a strong relationship of friendship, trust and cooperation. He was of the opinion that capital and labor should support each other and bring peace and harmony to the organizations. The Industrial Dispute Act 1947 and the Industrial Policy of 1948 had suggested that the labor should be involved in all matters related to industrial production. The Industrial Policy Resolution of 1956 also gave importance to the need for workers' participation in management. It also stated the importance of joint consultation between workers, technicians and management, and expected that the public sector enterprises should set example in this respect. The aim of the government in giving importance to workers' participation was to create a socialist society where workers can share managerial powers. When we try to understand the objectives of WPM as envisaged in the second 5-year plan of India, it facilitates these aspects: increase in productivity for benefit of all concerned to an enterprise, that is the employer, the employees and the community at large. Satisfaction of workers' urge for self-expression in the matters of enterprise management. Making employees better understand their roles in organization, and in ultimate sense, the objective of WPM in India is to achieve organizational effectiveness and the satisfaction of the employees. Let us now try to understand what are the different levels of participation. Participation is possible at all levels of management. The only difference is that of degree and nature of application. WPM depends upon the nature of work, nature of functions, quality of manpower, strength of workers, attitude of trade unions, attitude of management and the organizational culture. There are other factors responsible for application of WPM like the government policy on labor, industrial acts, different phases of trade cycle, economic and political stability and situations, various types of issues, attitude of employees, management culture and the past experience of management. Workers' participation is more of a balancing situation. Broadly speaking, there are 5 levels of workers' participation in management. What are they? Firstly, information participation level. It ensures that the employees are in a position to receive information and express their views pertaining to matters of general and economic importance. The second level is that of associative participation level. In this, the members have the right to receive information, discuss and give suggestions on the general and economic conditions of the organization like production, markets, finance and technology which affects the position of the organization or organization's profit and loss account. The third level is that of consultative participation level. In such level of participation, workers are consulted on the matters of employee welfare such as work, safety, health and training. It involves a higher degree of sharing of views of the workers and giving them an opportunity to express their feelings and opinions. In this level of participation, it is the management's prerogative to accept the suggestions of the workers given at the participative forum. Workers' suggestions are only of advisory nature. The fourth level is administrative participation level. This gives a greater degree of sharing of authority and responsibility of management functions. The issues taken at this level are welfare, safety, training, preparing work schedules, working hours, incentives, holidays and rewards, for valuable suggestions. The fifth level is the decisive participation level. This is the highest form of participation where decisions are taken jointly on the matters relating to production, welfare, economic, financial and administrative policies. The delegation of authority and responsibility of managerial functions to the workers is maximum at this level of participation. When participation is done at this level, it speaks of democracy and the democratic style of management. It also shows the faith and trust between the management and the employees. There are also different forms of workers' participation in management. They are works committee, joint management council, joint councils, joint production committee, unit councils, plant councils, shop councils, workers' representations on board of management, workers' participation in share capital, etc. It is extremely important for us to understand that how to make WPM effective. The review of the literature on industrial relations suggests that these measures can be utilized to make WPM more effective. There must be a complete agreement and clarity on the manner in which various participative schemes should function between both the parties. An environment of industrial conflicts flowing from bad interpersonal relations will generate frustration and alienation among workers, which will have a dampening consequence on the working of the scheme. Therefore, there should be a publicity given to the workers' participation so that the idea of participation may find its root in the minds of these who are to implement the scheme. Necessary lectures, discussions, films, shows, conferences, seminars and other methods of propaganda may be employed profitably to create enthusiasm about the scheme among the management personnel as well as those of workers. Both the workers and management should have a complete faith in the efficacy of the scheme and should pool their talents and resources and demonstrate their will to work for achieving of their goals. The participation should be real and must be based on mutual trust and confidence. The form, coverage, extent and levels of participation should be in the interest of the parties concerned. The issues related to major strategies, productive diversification or the product diversification, the evaluation of costs, the human resource development and the expansion of markets should also be brought under the jurisdiction of the participating bodies. The system of participation must be complementary to the collective bargaining process. The programs for training and education should be developed comprehensively. Labor is to be educated for enabling them to think clearly, rationally and logically, to enable them to feel deeply and emotionally and to act in a responsible way. Development of trade union on proper lines is also very important. There must be a free flow of information between labor and management throughout the enterprise. The decision taken at different participatory forums must be sincerely done in a stipulated period of time so as to get faith in the utility of the scheme. The management should design a proper system so that the effectiveness of the schemes may be assessed periodically and if required, the changes may be made to make the scheme more advantageous for all the parties. friends, let us now discuss the second part of this lesson, which is on collective bargaining. Collective bargaining is a key means through which employers and their organizations and trade unions can establish fair wages and working conditions. It also provides the basis for sound labor relations. The significant issues on the bargaining agenda include wages, working time, training, occupational health and safety, and equal treatment. The objective of these negotiations is to arrive at a collective agreement that regulates terms and conditions of employment. Collective agreements may also address the rights and responsibilities of the parties, thus ensuring harmonious and productive industries and workplaces. Enhancing the inclusiveness of collective bargaining and collective agreements is a key means for reducing inequality and extending labor protection. Collective bargaining as a term came in existence and gained importance in the writings of Beatrice and Sidney Webb. This movement started in Great Britain and found traces of its use as early as 1874 among the coal miners. It has been used in different forms and has also undergone major modifications from time to time. It has acquired different characteristics and patterns in different countries. ILO, International Labour Organization, defines collective bargaining as an institutional procedure of joint determination of the rules to govern the terms and conditions of employment of the workers concerned and the labour management relation itself. Collective bargaining is a technique adopted by the organizations of workers and employers collectively to resolve their differences without the assistance of a third party or the intervention of the third party. Collective bargaining is a process of discussion and negotiation between the employer and a trade union, culminating in a written agreement and the adjustment of problems arising under the agreement. The Honorable Supreme Court of India has defined the process of collective bargaining as a technique by which dispute as to conditions of employment is resolved amicably by agreement rather than coercion. Workers, who are generally represented by a trade union, use this medium to express their grievance about various issues such as wages and working conditions. There are different principles of collective bargaining. Collective bargaining should enable the union leaders to present to management their demands and desires and also create a ground for the management to explain to the union leaders their problems and difficulties. There are distinct principles for management. The management must periodically examine the rules and regulations which govern the labor force and the industrial relations. The management should give recognition to the unions without any reservations and must assume the workforce as a constructive and cooperative force in its organization. The management must develop and follow a realistic labor policy which should not only be accepted at all levels of the organization, but should also be implemented to support the effectiveness of collective bargaining. Management must be involved in an organized effort and exercise to establish a strong and satisfactory relationship with the employees' union and their representatives. Management must make efforts to educate the unions or its members regarding the importance and advantages of collective bargaining. The management should recognize notice, understand and solve the problems and grievances as soon as possible and at the level which the problem has taken place, rather than the trade union bringing it to the notice of the management. While bargaining with the unions, the management should not only think from the point of economic considerations, but should also have greater emphasis on social considerations to have a more rational and balanced negotiation. Management should have the willing acceptance to recognize representative union for joint bargaining efforts and should also establish uniform conditions of employment with a view to avoid industrial disputes and maintain peace and harmony in the industry. Apart from principles for management, there are also principles for trade union. Trade union must understand the economic implications of collective bargaining and realize that the demands of the unions must be met from the income and resources of the organization. If the trade unions have to see the complete promotion of collective bargaining, it has to take complete efforts to eliminate undemocratic practices within their own organization. The unions must have the responsibility and obligation to support the management in the elimination of waste and wasteful costs. It should give importance to improving productivity and quality of production. Trade union must understand that it is a two-way process and mutual give and take rather than take it or leave it method of settlement of disputes. For a trade union, collective bargaining should not be a competitive process, but essentially a complementary process. As a principle, the trade union should refrain from putting forward additional and exaggerated demands on the management. They should understand that collective bargaining is by nature a process of compromise and flexibility. There is a very distinct procedure for collective bargaining. The procedure for initiative collective bargaining includes these aspects. Firstly, a charter of demands. The trade union notifies the employer for initiating collective bargaining negotiations. The representatives of the trade union draft a charter of demands which contains issues related to terms of employment and the working conditions, namely wages and allowances, bonuses, working hours, benefits, holidays, etc. In some cases, an employer may also notify the trade union and initiate collective bargaining negotiations. The second aspect is that of negotiation. Negotiation, as I just mentioned, is next step after submission of charter of demands by the trade union. Both the employer and the employee seek opportunities to suggest compromise solutions in their favor until an agreement is reached. If it is impossible to reach out to an agreement, a third party, which can be a mediator or arbitrator, may be brought in from outside. If even with the assistance of the third party, no viable solution can be found to resolve the party differences, the trade union may decide to engage in strikes. The third aspect is collective bargaining agreement. Pursuant to the negotiations between the parties, a collective bargaining agreement is executed between the employer and workmen represented by the trade unions, setting out the terms of employment and working conditions of labor. Strikes. If both parties fail to reach an agreement because of mutual consensus, the union may go on a strike, which shall be in accordance with the provisions of Industrial Disputes Act 1947. Conciliation. Let us try to understand what is this. Conciliation refers to the process by which representatives of workers and employers are brought together before a third party with a view to persuading them to arrive at an agreement by mutual discussion between them. The third party may be on one individual or a group of people. Once the conciliation officer receives a notice of strike or lockout, the conciliation proceedings shall commence. The state government may appoint a conciliation officer or a board of conciliation to investigate disputes, mediate and promote a settlement. Workers are prohibited from going on strike during the pendency of such conciliation proceedings. Conciliation proceeding may have one of these three outcomes, namely a settlement, secondly no settlement, thirdly reference being made to the appropriate labour court or any other industrial tribunal. Compulsory arbitration or adjudication. When conciliation and mediation fail, parties may either resort to compulsory or voluntary arbitration. Arbitration is a process in which the conflicting parties agree to refer their dispute to a neutral third party known as arbitrator. Arbitration differs from conciliation in the sense that in arbitration, the arbitrator gives his judgment on a dispute, while in conciliation, the conciliator encourages disputing parties to reach at a decision. In voluntary arbitration, both conflicting parties appoint a neutral third party as arbitrator. The collective bargaining agreements prevalent in India are bipartite agreements, settlements, consent awards, etc. Friends, there are several challenges of collective bargaining also. Let us try to discuss about each one of them. One of the most important challenges, weak unions. Collective bargaining process mainly depends on the strength of unions. Indian unions are marked with multiplicity, inter and intra-union rivalry, weak financial position and non-recognition. Weak trade unions cannot initiate strong arguments during the negotiations. The lack of unified and strong trade union movement represents a missing link in the existing industrial relations framework. There are also problems from government. The government has not been making any strong efforts for the development of collective bargaining according to the experts. Collective bargaining has not flourished on a voluntary basis in Indian scenario. Collective bargaining also is challenged with legal problems. Much attempt has not been made to rationalize or simplify the multifarious laws covering labour management relations. Another challenge is that of attitude of management. Employers' negative attitudes have come in the way of negotiation with unions voluntarily. With regard to bargaining agent, employers quite often are not very sure who the recognized bargaining agent is. When there are multiple unions, bargaining with one union is difficult. There is also statutory fixation of conditions of work. Areas of collective bargaining have not grown in view of the encouragement given to wage boards, pay commissions, statutory fixation of other conditions of work and social security measures. Apart from these factors, political interference is a big challenge. The political parties interfere in the smooth functioning of the union. There are also outsiders in the process of collective bargaining. The Trade Union Act 1926 permits outsiders to be the office bearers of a union to the extent of half the total number of office bearers. Outside individuals who have little knowledge of the background of the labor problems, history of labor movement, fundamentals of trade unionism and technique of the industry, and with even little general education assume the charge of labor union and become the self-appointed custodian of the welfare of the workers. The employers therefore have been reluctant to discuss and negotiate industrial matters with outsiders who have no personal or direct knowledge of day-to-day affairs of the industry. Critics says that the presence of outsiders is one of the important reasons for the failure of collective bargaining in India. Industrial relations framework. Collective bargaining presupposes an appropriate industrial relations framework which provides scope for effective interaction of the parties within the parameters set by the requirement of peaceful existence. It has been opined that in India, the conditions necessary for such interaction are either non-existent or not feasible, thus making industrial relations framework less hospitable for the development of a collective bargaining relationship in the machinery. Apart from these factors, the other challenges include the unorganized trade unions in India are also the root cause of inefficient collective bargaining of trade unions. Factors such as inter-union and intra-union rivalry, multiplicity of trade unions, self-seeking politicians fiddling in trade unions, encouragement to workers for indulging in coercion measures, intimidation, violence, etc. Collective bargaining has become distributive bargaining. Refusal by the employer to bargain collectively in good faith is an unfair labor practice as per the Industrial Disputes Act 1947. For a successful process of collective bargaining, it must begin with proposals rather than demands, and the parties should be ready to negotiate and compromise.